speak to the manager, please, and quick about it. Meldrew. No, he doesn't, but he bloody well will shortly.
One Foot in the Grave is a uniquely unconventional sitcom.
Perfect working order.
It was a remarkable series.
Try and get some rest, or you'll be irritable all day long.
I'm always irritable all day long.
I know you are.
One Foot in the Grave makes me laugh out loud in a way that I'm not one for laughing out loud.
Good morning.
Goodbye.
For so many episodes, David Renwick doesn't write one false note.
I'll tell you what bloody attitude I like, and you can just shut off. Hello?
Back in the 90s, up to 18 million of us tuned in every week to enjoy another Meldrew mega meltdown.
Get a move on up front, for God's sake. What the bloody hell's going on up there?
Tonight, we salute one of our best-loved comedies in the company of a genuine sitcom legend. Victor Meldrew himself, Richard Wilson.
Afternoon.
There's no one could do it like me. No.
Richard was great at going into the audience and chatting to them.
I'd just like to say hello to you, so you get used to me and I get used to you.
Whilst I just, sulked round the back.
You bastards! Come back here again, I'll kill the lot of you!
There'll be backstage gossip from the crew.
You'll be driving around with boots full of whiskey to drop off to disgruntled people who couldn't get into their houses.
You'll be treated to exclusive behind-the-scenes photos. And of course, we're celebrating a certain catchphrase.
Do not believe it!
I got the catchphrase shouted at me everywhere.
I don't believe it.
So tether your tortoise
4291.
and put down that puppy. Because for one night only,
The bottom of the freezer cabinet. There's a cat in it.
One Foot in the Grave is back.
What? Dead one?
Well, let's not play with a bloody ball of wool.
You'd better believe it.
Yes. This is going to be fun.
They say I might as well face the truth.
One Foot in the Grave first appeared on our screens in January 1990, going on to become one of this country's best-loved sitcoms.
Of course it is. Because I'm in it.
And introducing us to a certain Victor Meldrew, one of comedy's most iconic characters.
1 foot in the grave.
What terrible news?
She didn't say. She just said it wasn't worth shoving your head in a gas oven over, and you should think of it as a brand new chapter in your life.
She must have gone completely loopy.
The first episode, he was made redundant. A lot of people thought he was a pensioner. He wasn't. He was made redundant.
Of course, the biggest problem of all was, how do you ever replace a man like Victor Meldrew? Well, basically, with this box.
Right from the very beginning, where he's replaced by a box, a man who's suddenly what's his place in the world now, is it's a fascinating way to start and see what unravels.
First episode sets up the whole premise. He's being replaced at a young age by a machine.
It does everything you used to do, except complain about the air conditioning.
He's put out to pasture, and there seems to be a sort of callousness.
Lucky old you, Victor. A man of leisure at last.
Having been unceremoniously dumped on the scrap heap, the 60-year-old Victor retreats to the safety of his suburban living room and his long-suffering wife, Margaret.
What is it? What's the matter?
I've been replaced by a box.
What are you talking about?
It's standard procedure, apparently, for a man of my age. The next stage is to stick you inside one.
Now, the writer, Dave Rennick, knows that he's about to unleash a monster on us all. But we must make sure that we fall in love with the monster as much as we can in the early part.
What did they say?
Bugger off, I think, was the general gist of it.
The man loses his livelihood and is at home and thinks, what the hell do I do now?
9 o'clock. 14 more hours before it's time to go to bed.
It's a very clever device to make sure that, don't worry, the audience will be on your side after this first bit, and then we can play around a bit more. We can make you more horrible.
You thought, now what's this going to be about?
Why is it when life's at its lowest ebb, when you really need some good news to cheer you up, the only only thing that comes through your letterbox is a bloody Wix catalogue.
1 Foot in the Grave was not about death, it was about life. And the fact that he had 1 foot out of the grave was much more important.
I think that's what was so clever about it, that you could go into that thinking, oh, here's another comedy about a couple that could be a cosy sitcom, but actually completely wasn't. And it was a man railing against the injustices of the world.
It's not the average sitcom. It sort of breaks the sort of boundaries of what a sitcom should be, or could be, or used to be.
It's very relatable, but it's also, I mean, like Fawlty Towers in a way, it's an incredibly well-written farce.
If you watch it, you scratch the surface, it's actually quite bleak and often macabre almost. And I think that's part of its enduring appeal, that it sort of works on both levels.
I never felt so fit and healthy. I think I'm in better shape now than I've ever been, he says.
When did he write that letter?
Thursday, why?
This one's from Alice. She says on the way back from posting that letter, he had a heart attack and dropped dead on the pavement. He'd only just turned 60 as well.
Had he really?
It was clear from the get-go that this utterly unorthodox sitcom wasn't about to play by the rules.
One of the moulds that was broken with 1 Foot is that the two central characters were of an age. They were middle-aged. He was forced into retirement to be replaced by a box, which then of course, puts him at home with his wife 24/7.
Oh. Ah, I've got a pain in my chest now.
What sort of pain?
What?
Does it feel as though there's an elephant standing on your rib cage?
Yes, that's exactly the feeling.
How do you know?
What?
Well, have you ever had an elephant standing on your rib cage?
You start with two fantastic actors, Richard Wilson and Ed Crosby, and you then give them a wonderful script. And the key thing is, there are so many jokes that make you laugh.
My pulse has stopped now. I'm clinically dead.
It's the surprise of them, the innovation, and the fact that, as in any good sitcom, the situation is under pressure. They're together in this house, and that gives them a kind of energy to sort of spark out of it.
What time is your eye clinic appointment tomorrow?
9 o'clock.
Well, try and get some rest, or you'll be irritable all day long.
I'm always irritable all day long.
I know you are.
The natural friction that results from that was part of the joy of the scripts that David created.
What's that buzzing noise?
Look! Will you go to sleep?
How can I go to sleep? Every time I nod off, I have this hideous dream that I'm imprisoned in a lunatic asylum with Arthur Askey singing outside the window.
I think it's funny because of David Rennick's ability to combine the very sort of well-observed domestic with the completely absurd.
Coming up.
That's just the sort of remark I expected. I don't know why I bother.
There's a crisis with the casting.
I turned it down at first because I thought I was too young.
And the curse of a certain catchphrase.
I don't believe it!
It was lovely. Well, it wasn't. It got a bit much at times.
One Foot in the Grave was conceived in the late 1980s, when Thatcher was in power.
And it's all happened, as dear old Tommy Cooper used to say. Just like that.
Greed was good, and wine bars heaved with yuppies. With the elderly feeling increasingly marginalised, it was time to give them a voice, and comedy was the ideal way to do it.
It was a very socially conscious show. It talked about loneliness, illness, the treatment of the elderly, how ignored they are, how invisible they are, how dispensable they are.
In Thatcher's time, to be honest, a lot of people felt that they were ignored and left behind, and the elderly certainly were in that bracket. So having someone who had a voice and spoke for them, the timing of the sitcom couldn't have been better.
David Renwick, the writer and creator of One Foot in the Grave, started out as a journalist, but switched to writing comedy in the mid-1970s, working for many of the biggest names in television entertainment.
He's written for the two Ronnies sketches. I think he did the Mastermind sketch.
And so to our first contender. Good evening. Your name, please.
Good evening.
Your first heat, your chosen subject was answering questions before they were asked. This time, you have chosen to answer the question before last each time. Is that correct?
Charlie Smithers.
Then he's written for Les Dawson.
The only trouble I find with taking the wife to the zoo is I have to buy 2 tickets. One to get her in and one to get her out.
Having worked with those greats, you learn your craft and you learn what makes people laugh out loud.
Tired of cosy suburban sitcoms from Terry and June to George and Mildred, David Renwick wanted to create one that subtly subverted the genre, didn't shy away from life's less savoury subjects, and had a crotchety curmudgeon at its core.
Yeah, that's just the sort of remark I expected. I don't know why I bother.
I never made any secret of the fact that Victor Meldrew, is me, totally. Which is not to say that I behave in the same way that he does, but the attitudes are universally are my attitudes.
David Renwick was probably one of the cleverest writers I've ever worked with.
He's a very particular writer. He likes perfection. He's so clever. His rhythms are so good, too.
I think that he had the courage and the ingenuity to come up with, and the foresight to go, I'm just going to do a guy who's sort of in many ways miserable about everything, doesn't want to do anything, everything's wrong. And he sort of distilled that into that character. But David Renwick's definitely a genius.
What is it with kids these days? They're not cracking your skull open with a tire lever for pleasure and profit. They're vandalising your back wall and shoving bottles of urine through your letterbox.
Shoving what?
Well, you saw that in the doormat this morning.
That was a free sample of Lucasade.
The part of Victor Meldrew was written specially for the actor Richard Wilson, who'd featured in many sitcoms but never played the leading role.
I'd seen Richard in such things as Only When I Laugh, I think was a hospital comedy that was quite bizarre. You had the same 3 patients in hospital for about 3 years who didn't seem to get any better or worse or have anything wrong with them at all. That's the world of sitcom where you can stretch things like that.
I had small parts in Only When I Laugh. I used to say, could you just write me a bit more? You don't have to broadcast it. I was getting fed up with the hospital series.
Having hoped that Richard would jump at the chance of a starring role, David Renwick was surprised to meet some initial resistance, due to Victor Meldrew being 60 years old, whilst Richard himself was a mere 54.
He wrote this with me in mind, apparently. I turned it down at first because I thought I was too young.
I was thinking, well, I've written some scripts that I'm quite pleased with here, and it's all going to go down the toilet because, we'll get some competent actor to play the part, or very good actor, but not a funny actor. And it will be, nothing really.
And then they sent me more scripts, and I began to see how good they were, and I went and saw them, and of course, I knew if I went to see them, I'd end up doing it.
He was persuaded to doing it, which was, you can't sort of imagine anybody else doing that at all. When you get an actor as good as he is and a writer as good as David, and they combine, and then it's sort of kismet. Richard's absolutely sublime. The top of his game.
It was much tougher being in the leading role. I remember the first episode. I wasn't too nervous, but when I did it, it was a bit nerve-wracking.
Every now and then, a sitcom introduces us to a truly original character, destined to enter into popular culture. And in January 1990, Victor Meldrew was added to that list.
Victor was remarkable because he was very brave, Victor. He said what he thought, and if he didn't like something, he would tell them.
I'll tell you what bloody attitude I like, and you can just shut off! Hello!
And that's how well David wrote it. Very believable.
What's interesting to me about Victor Meldrew is that he has qualities of people like Basil Fawlty and Alf Garnett and anyone else who can get that kind of angry, grumpy energy out of them.
Good
Goodbye.
He's got that Basil Fawlty quality of, right, I'm just gonna, just have it now.
Whenever he gets angry, which is, of course, all the time, there is very good reason for him to get angry all the time.
Victor was a man who spoke his mind.
He probably criticised things that everyone wants to criticise, but they don't necessarily do it vocally or quite as wittily as he does.
David has written in the things that really annoy the older, not just the older generation, I think people in general.
In a way, he became a spokesperson for his age. He highlighted the things that we would love to, slag off, but we're too polite to do so because we're British.
I'd like to speak to the manager, please, and quick about it. Meldrew. No, he doesn't, but he bloody well will shortly.
Most of the things that he railed on about are things which we feel the same things about, but nothing like as exaggerated. And we don't take it to that extreme, but secretly we'd like to.
Everybody recognises someone in the family or someone that they know who's just a grumpy old man. And Richard is so wonderful at being a grumpy old man.
You callous, cold-hearted, thieving bastards! Don't like to miss who in the way? What the bloody hell do you think I am? I'd sooner stick my head in a pan of boiling chip fat. Get a move on up front, for God's sake! What the bloody hell's going on up there? Bastards! Come back here again, I'll kill the lot of you!
Victor fired against people who had upset him, leaving litter in the streets and things like that.
Litter. That's one of my pet hates. I hate that. I do shout out the car window, pick it up.
He's always railing against other people's inability to consider other people.
I was in my early 20s when I worked on it. I'm now the age of Richard when he was in it, and I can totally relate to some of the things he complains and moans about. So I think that's why I think there's a bit of Victor in all of us as we get to a certain age.
Every classic sitcom character has their calling card, but in the case of Victor Meldrew, it happened by accident.
I do not believe it!
It became a catchphrase because everyone says, your train is late. Oh, God, I don't believe it. It's sort of saying, what, again? Really, God? Really? Again, you're doing this to me?
I don't believe it was not written as a catchphrase.
I don't believe it!
It's so expressive. It's such a nugget of your frustration with a world that seems to constantly be against you.
He said it a lot, and then it caught on.
I don't believe it. Was that it? Or was it, I don't believe it?
If anyone says the words, I don't believe it, you wouldn't pay any attention. It's the way he says it that it just has, every word has a frustration in you. I don't believe it.
Well, he's got that sort of posh hasn't he? I don't believe it.
It's also a catchphrase that is applicable to any situation. We've all sort of thought those words or said those words at one point or other. You can't, it's not so easy to make a catchphrase out of "that's my horse." There's very few days of the week you can use that.
Catchphrases, I think, are initially really helpful, and then they become, for the actor, something of an albatross.
I got the catchphrase shouted at me everywhere.
It was the bane of Richard's life, I think. Absolutely. And then he got to the point where he would only say it if people gave money to charity.
I had a cab driver the other day who said to me, I picked up that Richard Wilson the other day, Victor Meldrew. I said, yeah. I said to him, I don't believe it. And he looks at me rather angrily. He's been listening to people say that to him for 35 years, thinking it's the first time he's ever heard it.
In foreign countries, even. I thought, oh my gosh, it's got here as well.
It was this idea that led to a classic comedy cross-pollination when One Foot in the Grave met Father Ted, with an inspired and unforgettable take on the burden of a celebrity being lumbered with a catchphrase.
I don't believe it!
You can almost believe for a second that Richard Wilson was dying to do this somewhere, because I'm sure it happened to him regularly.
It was lovely. Well, it wasn't. It got a bit much at times.
Coming up, we'll bring you some rare behind-the-scenes moments.
Richard was great at going into the audience and chatting to them.
Just like to say hello to you, so you get used to me and I get used to you.
Whilst I just, sulked round the back, looking at my watch.
And things don't always go all right on the night.
Laughing and... What in the name of bloody hell?
At its height, over 17 million of us tuned in to revel in the exasperations and frustrations of Victor Meldrew in One Foot in the Grave.
Unbelievable. You see this? But I just found one of those crackers you bought.
No, but do please tell me.
Question. What's the difference between Victor Meldrew and a chef who keeps dropping his pancakes? Answer, they're both useless tossers.
As with all the most popular BBC sitcoms of the 80s and 90s, the interiors for One Foot in the Grave were filmed in front of a live studio audience at Television Centre in West London.
The actors take a week to rehearse the lines in rehearsal rooms, not in the set itself, but in a dummy set, so that they then become word perfect by the end of the week.
When we did our read-throughs, that was always the best laughs you got, when we were all just had a good time. And then you got used to saying the funny lines.
Once you've read the script initially, you've told the jokes. They're not really funny when you retell them in rehearsal sort of 9 times. And so that bit becomes sort of like an acting exercise.
David would come to the read-through rehearsal, and then he'd come to the studio on the Sunday.
The studio recording would be a mixture of the scenes that you'd be doing in front of the audience and the stuff that you'd filmed.
We used to put the filming in roughly where it would be used so that the audience understood the storyline.
And do that however many times it took until you got the audience to react and the cast to say the words in the right order.
For director Susie Belbin, it was imperative for the studio floor plan to be set out exactly like Victor and Margaret's home.
The set was one of the first that tried to reflect the actual layout of the ground floor of a set of terraced houses.
You could have them going through to the living room because you'd have some more cameras, and then you'd start there and then the cameras would move over. So it wasn't quite as disjointed as they somehow can be if you're, 4 cameras and then you're in a set over there. We could run things on a little more, and that was, established by Susie.
Susie loved this shot of up the stairs.
Why? You can never go where you want to.
To give this shot of the front door and the downstairs loo and the living room door to the left. There was a back and a side, but you could go round the back, and the kitchen was set back from the living room, all set on an angle so that cameras could get in, and the audience could get the best view that they were able to get.
Beautifully choreographed piece of joy.
As the show's popularity grew, so did the demand for studio tickets. And the lucky few that attended were treated to an up-close and personal live performance.
It's a very long process, recording a half-hour show. It'll take 2.5, 3 hours.
I would always have a little chat with the audience beforehand just to relax me and things like that.
Richard was great at going into the audience and chatting to them.
Just like to say hello to you, so you get used to me and I get used to you.
Whilst I just, sulked round the back, looking at my watch.
It got terribly popular. People wanted to come to the live shows.
How was your day? Oh, did that woman ring you at your mother's? Desiree... I've forgotten her name.
Richard brings this brilliant sort of truthfulness to everything he does, but at the same time, he's proper funny.
Said her name was...
He's got funny bones. So when you're doing a sitcom, i.e. a show with you've got an audience, having someone that understands laughter and rhythm and all of that and plays the audience is great.
Someone up there's laughing at us, that's what that is. Laughing and...
While Richard Wilson came to embrace the audience, not all the cast felt the same.
Is that a beetle down there?
Where?
Down there by the door. It's a bug of some sort or other.
Even for seasoned actors, the pressures of performing in front of a live studio audience were still felt.
Well,
I'm waiting for the front doorbell.
There should be a doorbell.
It's very difficult to work under those circumstances.
Just try eating the chips.
Yes, I might be able to manage.
You didn't know whether you were playing to the audience or you were playing to the camera or what. And we were very, very nervous.
Someone's finger!
If you'd come close to us, you would see the shaking of your hands and everything.
The audience are there, so it's that there's theatre in that element, but you've got a camera here, so you can't be playing to the audience. You're kind of using them for the comedy.
Oh, tell me it's not. Surely.
It's been deep fried.
It's a lot more difficult to do stuff in front of an audience than it is to do stuff on film, because on film you just retake as many times as you like until you get it right.
Some actors are just brilliant at, they get it straight away, which, all the one foot cast did.
1 Foot in the Grave may have revolved around the misfortunes of Victor Meldrew, but equally agonising were the trials and tribulations he inflicted on his wife Margaret, played by Annette Crosby.
Will you give over and stop moon?
You know, Margaret, you want to try and relax a bit more. You're getting very irritable these days.
I'd met her a couple of times, but I'd never worked with her. And she had never done a sitcom, but she was a very good comedian. She was quite straight in many ways, but her comedy was very well done.
She was 50% of what made it work. I mean, Annette's character was absolutely crucial to the whole Victor and Margaret battle, because, she gave as good as she got.
Tomorrow morning, I'm going back to work. I'm going back to work for a bloody rest!
Well, doctor says it's nervous exhaustion, mainly. It's been building up over the last 35 years. Very strange smell downstairs when I came in. Wonder what that could be.
I wonder.
When things go wrong, you'll notice that she may be exasperated, but she rather likes the fact that he's messed it up again. So the hierarchy, who is the more powerful, who is the more dependent, is played out because, of course, he's balls it up again.
When you've been with someone for that many years, you can't imagine your life without them, even though they frustrate the life out of you. And you felt that.
She was put upon, very down-to-earth woman, did her best and kept him on the straight and narrow as far as she could.
She absolutely stood her ground, and she was, a major part of the relationship. And a lot of the gags and the setups would never have worked without her reactions to them, or how she was, oh, God, he's at it again.
It's the two of you in a house together, trying to live your life and being assailed by the system and other people's stupidity. And that's what it's about, really, and that's what, you so relate to.
But, of course, there's always an element in which nobody can be taken for granted, even though you've been married a very long time.
Don't start up, all right, because I am not in the mood.
Although the Meldrews sometimes appeared to be a breaking point, there was much more to their marriage than met the eye.
Thank you. You felt that, because you'd say, well, why is she still with him? Why doesn't she just leave him and go somewhere? But no, she doesn't, because there is, whatever that love is that holds them together, it is still there.
She's the one who's calm. She's the one who's keeping the show on the road. But the key thing is she knows that he loves her.
And there is clearly a love between the two of them. She would and does miss him terribly when he's not there. Sometimes she has to get away and then she comes back, because there is a sort of very strong bond between the two of them.
I do think they loved each other very, very dearly, and the fact that they were always having rows, etc., would seem to me like most marriages.
Well, we all make mistakes from time to time.
Oh, yes. I certainly made one 35 years ago.
In the show, Richard is obviously the sort of serious one, and Annette is the slightly lighter, jollier one. And in real life, it was possibly the other way around, that Annette was actually the more serious of the two, and Richard was always playing jokes and, you know, making the audience laugh and keeping everything light and jolly. So it was a funny reversal in a way.
I can't answer that, can I?
Margaret did her best to be a steadying influence, but there was one surefire way to raise Victor's blood pressure.
Evening, Mr. Meldrew. I can't stay long, but...
Right you are, bye!
And it came in the form of her best friend, the well-intentioned but exasperating Mrs. Warboys.
How is Victor, then?
Oh, you know, Jeannie's usual self.
Oh, dear.
Mrs. Warboys was one of the best characters and one of the most popular, I think.
I'll just set him down here.
Right. Oh, hang on. I think I left the back door open, just in case he makes a boat for it.
As much as you've obviously got the two leads and Victor there as a hugely comic character, I personally think Mrs. Warboys is a funnier character.
There we are. Where would you like me to put him?
She's of an age, again, a third older person in the show, who clearly is in a complete world of her own, and Doreen Mantle played her so beautifully.
What the bloody hell's this?
It's Mr. Burkitt's dog, Nippy.
Nippy? Doesn't look very nippy from where I'm standing.
And turns out to be an even greater victim than Victor himself.
I don't feel very safe with it.
Maybe the blade's gone a bit rusty. Oh, bugger that.
Jean Warboys is very kind, wanting to help, wanting to be there for them, and getting herself or them in a mess, and forgetting things, and sometimes being stupid.
Don't rock the frame like that, it won't do it any good. Perfect working order.
The thing about Mrs. Warboys is that she is a foil. She's a classic foil. And it's just that old thing that you can't really define. Why is it funny for certain things to be happening to Mrs. Warboys that if they were happening to Margaret would not be funny at all?
She's wonderful. I mean, the character is so dotty but well-meaning and sincere. You know, when she picks up Victor's suit from the dry cleaners and puts it across the back of the sofa, and it's a gorilla suit.
Took a bit of a while to find Margaret's. I think she won't be needing it now. I don't think they're all that well organised in that place, if you ask me.
She doesn't question it. She's just gone to get the suit, and here it is.
Victor just stood there and looked at it. He said, "What on earth is this?" I said, "Your suit." He said, "My suit. It's a gorilla's outfit."
Don't tell me they mixed up the tickets again.
Mixed up the... You must have seen it as a mistake when you got it out.
Well, I don't know what your suit looks like, do I?
Well, it doesn't bloody well look like this. I mean, where do you think I shop? King Kong at C&A's?
I met her once at a party about 25 years ago or something. I said, "Doreen Mantle." I said, "You're fantastic." And she sort of beamed, you know, as any of us would do, you know. She's not always in it, but when she is, I do, yes.
And Mrs. Warboys is a key player in one of the most acclaimed episodes of the entire 6th series, and one that broke new ground back in 1992.
Oh, God, dog.
Bitey.
People have done it since, Peter Kay particularly, but that episode where it's entirely in a car, in a traffic jam, I mean, that's genius.
When I read it, I just thought that was brilliant. Brilliant idea.
What are you looking at?
Ah, yes, here we are. Hell on earth. I believe we've taken a wrong turning.
It's a perfect situation for comedy, and that's when the really good writing about character comes out, because you've got to have somewhere to go, and then we're in a traffic jam and we're really bored and we're really fed up.
Want a sucky sweet?
Sucky sweet. I'll be sucking in that exhaust pipe in a minute. Much more of this.
You know how things become a catchphrase in your family? Whenever we were on a car journey, we'd always have a sucky sweet.
I always say that for a really super bank holiday treat, you've got to go a long way to beat 4.5 hours staring up a horse's bottom.
They spent the first 10 minutes talking about, looking up a horse's bottom, and this is so boring. I don't know whether to... And then Mrs. Warboys gets into the back of the car. You think, hang on, I thought they were in a traffic jam driving somewhere.
That feels a bit fresh.
Find one all right, then?
Oh, yes. There's a pub on the other side of that slope. They were very friendly.
Mrs. Warboys gets back in, and she's been to the toilet.
Do you want to go?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
It wasn't comfortable, but somehow we got used to being in this car and things happening. There was some wonderful lines in it.
I thought you'd at least be down by the remains of that rotting badger.
No, we're not. We're not likely to be either at this rate. Did you get my crisps?
Oh, no, sorry. They didn't have any salt and vinegar. They only had smoky bacon.
I asked you to get smoky bacon.
He wanted smoky bacon, and she thought said he didn't want smoky bacon. I mean, it's just sort of like this it's almost sort of Victoria Wood-esque, this kind of observation of the domestic. Brilliant.
Oh, they had plenty of smoky bacon.
But you didn't get any.
3 huge boxes chock full of them.
But you didn't get any.
No.
We filmed it in the Vauxhall trainee motorway. A whole lot of cars and horses and things. We also were filming it in midwinter, so it was freezing.
It took 3 weeks to do that episode, I think, because of the weather. It was supposed to be summer, and we were shivering. We had lots of underwear on.
I believe that they took the windscreen out of the front of the car, so you wouldn't get reflections on the for the camera and lights and all that sort of stuff. So it was quite cold when they were doing it.
There's a bloke we can't stand any longer, always on the bleeding moan. Every time we mend his bloody Honda, he's back grousing on the phone.
Nobody kind of moved or anything or came in. That was it. You were 3 characters stuck in that. Well, that was one of the best episodes ever.
Sing it up his mind. He can forget off till kingdom come.
Well, that was one of my favourites. It was my favourite.
Coming up, we meet the neighbours.
I think I said no initially. Pompous twit.
And Victor picks up the dog and bone.
Would you know what?
You might think it's only one Dachshund, but there were a few to choose from.
Like all the best sitcoms, One Foot in the Grave is firmly rooted in suburbia, where it pays to be on good terms with the neighbours, however peculiar they may be.
I'm guessing that David Renwick will have worked very hard at imagining how the neighbours would be, because of what they'll do to Victor, or because of what you can get out of Victor's reaction to them.
Meet the neighbours on the Meldrews' right, Pippa and Patrick Trench.
It's
Patrick and Pippa.
I think I said no initially. Pompous twit. I don't know. I think there were negotiations that went on, and eventually I said yes. And the first person I met was Richard Wilson, who I'd never met before, and we've been friends ever since. I think my character became sort of obsessed with Victor and was constantly spying on him and trying to trick him or catch him out, and that then became his persona. Really, that's kind of, you felt what he lived for was to do battle with his neighbour.
I think Angus Deayton's character was certainly nastier and more revengeful than Victor himself.
Do you get some kind of sick, perverted pleasure out of rowing with our neighbours?
Yes.
He had a nasty quality to him, quite a malicious side to him, which Victor Meldrew doesn't have.
I mean, Angus was just the perfect person, really, to be able to bite off some of the quite complicated lines that I would write for Patrick.
It was the first show that I'd done that I hadn't really had any hand in the writing of it. And so for me, the relief of thinking if something isn't working, I don't need to worry about it. I'm just speaking the lines.
Mad as a bloody March hare. I wonder if we get him certified on Bupa.
I mean, Angus was like a latter-day Cleese, really. I mean, I don't think he ever set out, consciously to become that. But he just had that wonderful rhythm and diction.
Here we are. What did I tell you? My horoscope for the day. Do not under any circumstances go round for a meal tonight at Victor Meldrew's unless accompanied by a trained exorcist. I would ring up and cancel, but I suppose it's a bit inconsiderate, isn't it, really? Dragging him out of his coffin in broad daylight.
Pippa was always on the lookout for when I was kind of crossing the line and going a little bit too far, and she was kind of the voice of reason in the same way as Margaret was to Victor.
You know who you're starting to turn into, don't you? Hmm? And the frightening thing is, you can't even see it.
It was seen, I think, as being a gradual transition into the same sort of person. So that's, I think, possibly what David Renwick always had in mind, because we were not dissimilar in the way in which we were critical of the outside world.
Next door to the left was the relentlessly cheerful yet decidedly off-kilter Nick Swaney, forever peeping through the garden fence.
Morning, Mr. Meldrew. Are you well? Oh, I expect you think I've gone completely off my head.
Nick Swaney character, as played by Owen Brennan, he is perhaps the most tragic figure in it, really.
Owen's character was weird and wonderful, but believable.
This grown-up schoolboy who never used Victor's first name, always called him Mr. Meldrew.
Morning, Mr. Meldrew. See, your fat pecker's nearly off then.
There's the two men who are totally, completely different, and that gives it energy.
Oh, Mother asked me to give you some cuttings from her Wandering Jew. Now, they like a bright position, but try and avoid the direct sunlight.
Thank you, that's very thoughtful of her.
Well, she's up there now, you can give her a wave.
We never see her, and nor does Victor.
There's always that suspicion, is she there or not? Is she alive or not, you know?
There she is, look. He says it's very nice of you, Mother.
Even though she's pointed out, she's up there, I can't see her.
The actual character was rather sweet and lovable, but you never really found out what the problem with the mother was. Because there was slightly Hitchcockian.
It was really rather eerie, some of it, sitting in the bedroom and mother's up there, and, there's something a bit of sort of Anthony Perkins, of him rigging his gate, much to Victor's horror.
Morning, Mr. Meldrew.
How did you...
Oh, I moved it further down to save trampling your pansies.
How extremely considerate of you.
And just feel, well, this is normal. I'm your neighbour. Hi, how are you? And then closing it up again with Victor going, what bloody hell is he doing with my gate?
He is strange, but of course it's strange because he's always trying to be nice. And what David Renwick is trying to do as a writer, and brilliantly so, is to point out the contrast, obviously, between the irascible Victor and the nice guy.
He means well, but he doesn't get a lot of satisfaction out of existence.
Over 6 series and 10 years, One Foot in the Grave picked up a host of awards, including 3 BAFTAs and 6 British Comedy Awards. But something that was less celebrated was its occasional use of animals.
Margaret,
What's the matter?
Did you put a cat in our freezer? The bottom of the freezer cabinet. There's a cat in it.
What? A dead one?
Well, let's not play with a bloody ball of wool. It's frozen solid, woman.
Oh, my God!
The frozen cat in the freezer. I don't know how that I don't remember how that happened, but I think that was the first frozen animal we used.
I thought they're not going to show it. They're not going to show it. And then when he opens the freezer door and it's actually taken out, it's so ridiculous that you can't help but laugh.
I think I feel sick.
Obviously, no animals were harmed during filming, but this didn't prevent a public outcry.
The frozen cat, I think, had more complaints than they'd had for a sitcom for 10 years or something.
Are you sure it's dead?
Well, I should think it's a pretty safe bed, wouldn't you? I mean, it's a bit parky in there at the best of times.
Probably one of the few things that David wouldn't do now.
How's it supposed to have kept warm? Rub two fish fingers together to start a fire?
Then it was a funny joke, and now I think he would go, oh no, he would probably understand more now the complaints that it got.
I think I heard Richard talking about it somewhere. He said, well, you know, this was before the internet. It was the actors that were getting the angry letters, not David. So it's like, well, can we cut down on the dead animals a bit?
I certainly got letters about being rude to animals.
And it wasn't just cats that received the 1 foot in the grave treatment.
He was pretty cruel to a lot of animals. I mean, the incinerated tortoise was like, oh, why? You know, it's just hideous.
There's no obligation to buy.
Does it look like a bloody convenient moment?
I
Margaret!
It's supposed to have been thrown on the fire and died, which was a very sad sort of thing to have in a sitcom, don't you think so?
When the format was sold to America, the American public, they thought, could not cope with the idea of a tortoise being dead, and so they had to change the ending so that the tortoise didn't die.
I'm not suggesting anybody freezes their cat or puts a tortoise in an incinerator, but it's a comic idea that, should that happen, we'd want to see Victor Meldrew reacting to it.
Hey, boy.
And it was an animal that supplied 1 foot in the grave with one of the greatest ever sitcom moments.
4291.
I loved the puppy. It was great. I think we did it about 6 times or something, but the first one was the one that we actually used, where I sort of couldn't find it for a minute.
It works particularly well because the dog is the same shape as a telephone receiver. You know, if it had been a Yorkshire Terrier, it'd probably be amusing, but there's something about the similarity of the shape that really makes it work.
We had about 6 Denzels. That was the name of the dog. So you might think it's only one Dachshund, but there were a few to choose from.
To the left of Victor's armchair, there is a table. There's a side table, and lying behind the armchair is the animal handler. And I just seem to remember her sort of just grabbing the dog for dear life until, the cue, grabbing it safely.
Even if you know it's coming and you watch it knowing it's coming, you'll still not be able to see it on Richard's face that he's about to do that. And it's the reaction as soon as he's got the dog, which is that's comic timing at its absolute best.
It was the show's sight gags that were to become 1 foot in the grave's hallmark.
But I think one of the things that I really love about the programme is the visual humour. I always love visual humour. And 1 foot in the grave makes me laugh out loud in a way that I'm not one for laughing out loud.
Dear Mrs. Meldrew, have filled in the hole now. Hope it is to your satisfaction. It certainly is to mine.
Margaret?
They had to build a huge hole and put him on a chair because obviously he couldn't stand, and had to scoop all the earth back.
Victor? What are you doing? What am I doing? Wallpapering the spare bedroom. What the bloody hell are you looking at I'm doing? Not very much.
I was sitting in this hole. There was a draft coming down the garden. I remember at last we got to the end of it, and then Susie Belbin came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, it's not what we wanted. We've got to redo it." I think I did it 3 times. Sitting in this bloody garden hole.
Who's that?
Oh, it's Patrick and Pippa. I'll get them to give me a hand.
Don't you bloody dare! Let him see me like this. I'll never live it down.
So it was one of the less comfortable filming days for Richard, but it worked.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I think that's my phone. Would you excuse me, please, both of you?
Yes, Margaret, see you later. Come on, Patrick.
Oh,
Thankfully, it's now one of the most remembered scenes.
And even the simplest situations led to sublime sight gags.
Afternoon.
Visual humour is always the thing I go for when it's done really well.
Hello, is that Mr. P.T. Sturgeon? Yes, well, it's about a large yucca plant your garden centre delivered to my house this morning.
The yucca plant in the toilet thing, somebody said to me I'm responsible for one of Victor's greatest meltdowns. But, obviously I didn't write it.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what the problem is, Mr. Sturgeon. I was out the back working in the garden when he arrived, so I asked him if, for the time being, he'd put it in the downstairs toilet for me. And you know what he's done? He's only planted it in the... How anyone could be so utterly goofy just boggles the mind.
Yucca plant in the toilet that got a wonderful laugh.
Coming up, we're off on location.
The residents got a bit canny about this, and so they upped the price each series.
And they're queuing up for cameos.
Towards the end of the series, you were seeing sort of Peter Cook and Eric Idle and Tim Brooke-Taylor, Paul Merton. I mean, it was a pretty stellar cast.
One Foot in the Grave ran for 10 years from 1990, with audience figures increasing every time it reappeared.
Not until probably the 3rd series that we really hit the button, and we ended up with an audience of 22 million or something, I think, which is pretty remarkable. But early on, I don't think a lot of people knew about it.
And as well as retaining all the original cast and many of the crew, the show's eccentric and instantly recognisable opening credits and theme tune remained unchanged over 6 series.
1 foot in the grave.
I think I've heard David say that the opening title sequence is the cheapest one the BBC ever did for any programme, because it's just some stock footage of some tortoises walking around.
They obviously had some faith in the fact that they were prepared to pay someone like Eric Idle, who was pretty famous in those days, still is, to write, to commission him to write a signature tune.
I think there's a mismatch in my mind between the song and the title sequences, because tortoises are, I apologise to any tortoise lovers out there, but they're amongst the dullest of creatures.
The opening credits helps the idea that you are entering your little funny world that you like. You're into a cult now.
The absurd elements are kind of, a lot of them are kind of Python, inherited from a Python-esque tradition, I suppose.
David Renwick was obviously a big Python fan. If you see the sketches that he used to write for Alexi Sale's stuff, there was definitely a kind of Python-esque quality.
They say I might as well face the truth, but I am just too long in the tooth. I started to deteriorate, and now I've passed my own sell-by date.
I think it's partly because he revered Eric Idle so much that he probably felt it was a huge sort of coup to get him to sort of write the theme tune, sing the theme tune.
I've just got too many miles on the clock.
I can't think of many other sitcoms that have that kind of a song, really. I think commissioning Eric Idle to do the sitcom signature tune was definitely a nod and homage to his mentors.
1 foot in the grave.
While interiors were filmed in London, the exteriors were shot on the south coast.
We used to do all the filming in Bournemouth.
Well, between the first and second series, the house burnt down. So there was a different location, but then from series 2 right through to the end, yeah, it was the same house.
And, of course, because it then involved neighbours, it's not just finding one house. You've got to have the compliant neighbours on either side for 3 weeks of their life.
The houses were all the same, so you could mix them up. Kylie?
You'd have your 6 scripts. We'd go off to Bournemouth for 2-3 weeks, and you'd pull out all the location pieces.
Kylie?
Shoot everything that was outdoors, in the garden, outside the house, on, you know, locations that you couldn't recreate in a studio.
I don't believe it.
So all of that is in the can, so to speak, at the end of those 3 weeks. The high street, going in or out of a library or video rental shop or anything. So Richard appeared in most scenes, so Richard was a presence all the time.
A lot of people would find out that we were filming and come and watch, so very often we'd have people standing outside the house. I suppose people in the New Forest had nothing else to do, apart from ride ponies.
I remember being in the car with Annette, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning or something. We were still filming in the night scene. I remember saying to Annette, I don't know what all these people are. They're not going to see anything tonight. They're just the car driving away.
But filming in a neat suburban close came with its own problems.
You're virtually invading their home.
You know, everyone's quite excited to begin with, and then when they realise the disruption and chaos it causes, they become, you know, oh, here they go back again.
I think in those days you'd get away with, it's the BBC and not the cash.
The houses that were used, the residents or the owners were temporarily evacuated, but in a very nice way, so that we had free reign.
But of course it grew as well. Like in the first series, there were no Winnebagos, and, you know, Richard would go and sit in his car at lunch, you know, if he needed a look at his script. By the end, you've got a huge circus coming in with wagons and stuff. So location managers would be driving around with boots full of whiskey to drop off to disgruntled people who couldn't get into their houses because there's a lorry blocking the road.
We are only going into the hall. We're not going into the living room or whatever. It is just the entrance and the exit.
So you would do somebody walking into the front door from the street on location, and then you would cut into the studio as they came in.
And in the gardens, and of course the gardens were altered, fences changed so that Nick could come in from next door.
Morning, Mr. Meldrew. Lovely weather, I must say.
By the time the sitcom was quite well known, the residents got a bit canny about this, and so they upped the price each series. And by the end of it, I think they were charging way too much, and there was talk of Victor and Margaret suddenly moving to somewhere else. Fortunately, they were able to reach some kind of settlement.
As One Foot in the Grave became a monster hit, famous faces began clamouring for cameos.
We had loads of people, Ray Winston, Geoffrey Chater, Paul Merton, to name but a few. They just were everywhere, and they would just do maybe just one line.
I think when you've got a sitcom as well written as that, and with such a really exceptional, stellar central performance, it's no surprise you could get people like Peter Cook and Barbara Windsor and Phil Daniels, you know, big turns.
So Susie and David must have pulled a few favours just to get brief appearances from sometimes very well-known film stars and personalities of the time.
That kind of confidence and that kind of popularity is that you can cast pretty much anyone you want, and on the whole they'll say yes. So towards the end of the series, you were seeing sort of Tim Brooke-Taylor, Paul Merton. I mean, it was a pretty stellar cast.
Coming up, dramatic final scenes as One Foot finally comes to an end.
I said kill him. Yeah, do it.
After a run of 10 years, One Foot in the Grave's Victor Meldrew will meet his maker in tonight's final episode.
If you're opening up that hatch, she says be careful, because they've just put a bag of plaster inside.
In January 1995, the 5th series of One Foot in the Grave came to an end. And for the next couple of years, the Meldrews only popped up on our screens at Christmas. But in October 2000, something astonishing happened.
I was beyond delirious when I heard that it was coming back, because in a programme that had been so deceptively clever in almost every single episode, it really didn't come as a surprise that something extraordinary would happen to it.
And true to the form of this most eccentric of sitcoms, the audience were in for a big surprise.
David said, "I'm thinking of killing Victor. What do you think?" I said, "Kill him. Yeah, do it."
I had no idea that I was going to be the final series until I saw the script for the last show, and I saw that Victor was going to die. Sorry, spoiler.
I was very sad. I didn't want the series to end, but it was time that it ended.
Obviously, that's what David wanted. He felt as if he'd gone as far as he could with those characters and with the plot lines.
Yeah. What do you think of that then?
Having decided that both Victor's feet were headed for the grave, it was time to plan the great man's demise.
Now, you may not believe it, but Britain's grumpiest pensioner is about to make his last appearance. After a run of 10 years, 1 foot in the graves, Victor Meldrew will meet his maker in tonight's final episode. Here's our arts correspondent, David Silito.
The cold chill of an autumn ratings war tonight carries grumpy Victor Meldrew off to TV heaven in an extended final episode.
He says it's the most amazing thing. Next week, they're holding a reunion in London for all the old gang. And they've been desperately trying to get hold of you.
What sort of reunion?
Oh, you've got to go, Victor. You'll be able to swap stories, catch up with everyone.
It was quite brave, I think, to kill off Victor, because it means that you can't come back for a Christmas special or, Easter special or any kind of special.
There was much less sort of worry about social media, though, so nobody was that worried about people spilling the beans, although we did, when we shot it, we were very cautious about where we shot it and how we shot it.
My agent phoned me up and said, they want you to be in the last episode of 1 Foot in the Grave. I said, oh, fantastic. I mean, I'd met David a couple of times and expressed my admiration for his work. Brilliant writer. And I said, yeah, of course, and they sent me the script.
Paul Merton played a barman at the fateful reunion, only attended by Victor.
Yeah, it's the last bit of dialogue that Victor has with anybody, thinking that nobody's turned up for this works reunion, apart from himself.
Herbert Stranks is stuck in traffic on the M6 and doesn't think he'll be able to get here this side of Christmas. Alex Bendrix is very sorry, but he's had to fly to Hamburg on business at the last minute, and Bob Loft has decided it's too far to drive with his kidneys.
Right. It was very cruel.
It seemed to be obviously the most natural and logical and appropriate end for the character in a show where we had tried to, reflect the truthfulness of real life.
I just remember being quite sad and angry about it because I didn't want him to die, and certainly not that way.
And when the end came, it was totally out of the blue.
I just remember this hand falling into shot, which is a very kind of film-esque thing to do for a sitcom,
The more you think about the end, the last episode, I must say, the more I think it's brilliant.
But David had made that decision, and again, that's part of his brilliance. Sitcoms don't kill off characters, normally speaking.
We all felt that when we saw him on the side of the road about to be killed, we, as his fellow actors, felt terribly sad.
The sort of absurdity of the character is still maintained, and to have him, as it were, dying through bad luck, that's pretty clever, isn't it?
After the final episode was broadcast, some of the show's more ardent admirers worked out where Victor had been mowed down and went to pay tribute.
You won't believe it, but just a few days after his dramatic death, fans of the now-deceased Victor Meldrew have created a shrine at the scene of his fictitious demise.
It was next door to a pub. Yeah. Flowers, hats,
It just astonishes me that there are still people who ask, is it really finished? Who just somehow can't accept that he's gone.
The best shows in the world always do have the most serious fans, you know, and they can be sitcoms, they can be sci-fi, they can be drama, it doesn't matter. But when you have something that's real, you know, you would have people leaving flowers under the bridge where he died, you know, which, I mean, it is a bit strange to do, but they were that passionate about the show and the character.
And with no chance of a return for one of our most popular sitcoms, the cast had a variety of emotions.
I'd been doing it for quite a long while. I was getting a bit wearisome of being angry all the time.
Yeah, it was a real sort of, it was, yeah, the passing of an era, I suppose, the passing of a programme that has been hugely successful.
I was sorry to see the end of it because it was such fun to do.
Good morning.
Goodbye. He's only planted it in the...
Over its 10-year history, One Foot in the Grave gave us some of sitcom's most magnificent moments. And though Victor Meldrew has long since departed,
4291.
This defiantly unconventional comedy is destined to live forever.
Afternoon.
You'll always be able to see that that is an actor and a writer at the absolute top of their game.
It makes me laugh out loud, I think, more than any other sitcom I can think of, really.
I mean, I hope in 100 years' time, if the world is still spinning, it'll be talked about still.
He was a very popular man.
A fateful flight is under investigation tonight at 11:30 as aviation experts examine an air crash in Disaster Revealed. And viewers aren't happy next as we count down TV's 30 most complained about moments.